For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. And boom, episode number 11 of the Buffalo Roamer Podcast is officially live. Thank you so much for tuning in yet again. We have been rocking and rolling here at the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. We've enjoyed some success, so that's been fun. We cracked the top 40 charts in the wilderness category under the Apple Podcast charts. That was in our first week of existence, and since then, we've just been rocking and rolling, so thank you so much for listening. I've been getting a lot of great feedback, and glad that you are enjoying these stories of adventure and cool people. So if you do enjoy it, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. That would go a long way. Subscribe. And also, if you want to find out more, BuffaloRoamer.com, Facebook, Buffalo Roamer, Instagram, Buffalo_Roamer. All right, today's episode is going to be a fun one. I got Brian and Allison Ristola on the episode. Sorry, Brian and Allison, probably mispronounced your last name there, but they go by the trail names Beardoh and SweatPea, and they are serial long-distance thru hikers. They have hiked all kinds of trails across the country, from the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Great Divide Trail, Muir Trail, the Colorado Trail. They are currently on a trip on the Continental Divide Trail, so they're trying to complete the triple crown of the thru hiking world, which would be the AT, the PCT, and the Continental Divide Trail. I first met them on the Mississippi River when they had traded in their trekking poles for some paddles. They canoed the entire length of the Mississippi River. Took them 10 weeks. That was in 2017, I believe. It was the same year that I did it, and I met them in Minnesota on the river. So we'll chat about that a little bit as well. They're just overall really cool people, live a really interesting life, and they spend a lot of time on the trail. As you can imagine, hiking across the country in either the AT or PCT or any of the other ones takes a long time. So they spend a lot of time in the wilderness, and it's interesting to hear how they go about it and make all that stuff happen. Talk about a lot of awesome stories. So without further ado, let's get to Beardoh and SweatPea. Brian and Allison, the long-distance thru hikers. Also should mention that we talk about trail angels and river angels every once in a while throughout this podcast. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically just folks along the trail or along the river who help out thru hikers and thru paddlers, whatever means they have, whether it's bringing food, water, giving somebody a cold beer on the trail, all the way up to welcoming folks into their homes. These trail angels or river angels welcoming travelers into their homes and putting them up for a shower or a laundry or whatever it may be. So just a little side note there, if you're unfamiliar with the trail angel or river angel, that's what it is. So let's get to it. Brian and Allison, Beardoh and SweatPea, the long-distance hikers. What's going on, guys? Thanks for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having us. It's great to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, the last time I think I saw you would have been, I don't know if it was in Minnesota.
It was definitely in Minnesota. We didn't see anybody after Minnesota.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. On the Mississippi River. And so how long did your thru paddle of the Mississippi end up being?
I think it was like 10 weeks.
Okay. 10 weeks.
In total. Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk all about, all about your whole lives and adventures. But just starting on the Mississippi, since that's where we met each other, what was the Mississippi like compared to all of the other long distance trails that you guys have hiked?
It was a different kind of challenge for us. It was hard. There was four of us in our group, and we're all through hikers and kind of serial through hikers. And the Mississippi was odd to us to be sitting down all day and then get to camp, sit down, and then lay down.
Yeah.
And I think all of our bodies took a toll on all of our bodies. The paddling and just the sitting, it was really strange that way. There were things about the through paddle that are kind of similar to hiking in terms of running into strangers that offer a lot of kindness and welcomed us into their homes. And that was something that hiking and the paddle trip really had in common.
I don't think we had expected that to be the case on the Mississippi River. We had no idea that river angels existed. We know about trail angels, but didn't realize that there were river angels. And it was awesome on the Mississippi with the river angels, because instead of on a trail where they might see 100 people a year, on the Mississippi, they're just seeing a couple people. So they are so excited to see you, and they are so happy to help out in any way they can. They're not tired of people coming through. So we had such great experiences with the river angels.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I thought the same thing. The people I met along the journey, for me, it was that's a big part of what makes it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So take us through, the long storied history of long distance hikers, and just kind of give us like a overview of some of the trails you guys have bagged. And yeah, let's just start there. Take us through some of the trails that you guys have conquered. I mean, it's a bad term to use, but
sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Sometimes they conquer us.
Our first big trail was the Appalachian Trail, which we hiked in 2011. And before we started that trail, we had never even camped out more than 2 nights in a row.
Wow.
So it was a huge leap for us. And I think we were both just mentally ready for that kind of a complete shift in our lives. But so we did the Appalachian Trail first. I got kind of burnt out on it at that hike. And I also had a lot of injuries, I guess, just wasn't going to be hiking for a while. And so I didn't hike that next year, but Beardoh continued to do another long hike. He did the Pacific Crest Trail that next year, actually with Cue Ball, who you met on the Mississippi River. And then from there we did, a series of kind of medium length hikes. And we went back to do the PCT so that I could do it in 2016. And since then we've done some more medium length hikes, and the medium length hikes are kind of some of our favorites as well. We've hiked the Arizona Trail. We've hiked the Colorado Trail.
Great Divide Trail, Grand Enchantment Trail,
Tahoe Rim Trail, John Muir Trail,
Mogollon Rim Trail, Long Trail in Vermont, Wonderland Trail.
That's all I can think of right
now. A couple others.
I'm sure, but that's a long list in itself right there. And I'm curious, and you guys met in Tanzania, I read on your website as well, right?
Yeah. When we were Peace Corps volunteers, we were in the same training group. So right out of college, we met.
And I'm guessing, correct me if this is not right, but I'm guessing that was maybe the first big adventure for both of you is Tanzania.
For Brian, for me, I had actually been an exchange student when I was in high school. So for my whole senior year of high school, I lived in West Berlin. And it was actually coincidentally the year that the wall came down.
Oh,
so
wow.
Being in West Berlin during that time, I mean, I'm totally dating myself with that one, but it was an adventure for sure, being away from my family for an entire year. Living with people I'd never met before, but who became like a family to me, living in another language that I, knew a little bit, but didn't know a lot. So for me, that was like my big first real adventure?
Yeah.
For me, Peace Corps in Tanzania definitely was a big change of life for me. I had only been really in the Midwest for my whole life up until that age, which was 22 or 21. And we both went straight out of college. So we finished college, had a summer, and then left for Tanzania. And that experience really, I think, shaped a lot of our life, but a desire for adventure as well, because Tanzania is pretty remote. This was pre-cell phone and pre-internet, and things were pretty unconnected. And that definitely feels adventurous compared to traveling now.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a good friend of mine who was in, I believe, Zimbabwe, but I could be incorrect, but a good friend of mine, and it's the same kind of deal. He was not the most adventurous, not the most outgoing person. Goes there for 2 years, comes back, and it's a changed person, and outgoing, willing to talk to people. Just wants to go seek adventure. And I mean, that's kind of what it's all about, isn't it? It's cool to be able to look back after having done some of those things, to look back and be like, oh wow, that's a transformation that, it's hard to see in the moment, but when you look back, it's cool to notice.
Yeah, I think that for both of us, the Peace Corps really was just a huge perspective shifter, in that seeing a culture that is so different from what we both grew up in, and the opportunities that other people have versus the opportunities that we have, given just the complete randomness of where we were born. You just realize that the world is your oyster. You can do anything that you want to do. You just have to do it. You have to have like the gumption to actually do what you want to do. But for us, that was a really big deal, in that it just completely shifted our minds, and like, yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty cool, it's a cool concept to be able to comprehend, especially at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was pretty clear. And so we have not spent more than a year like stuck in a job or living where we don't want to live. We both had jobs we weren't crazy about after Peace Corps. We moved to Washington, D.C., and we had jobs there, career track jobs. And we didn't want those jobs, and we didn't want to live in DC. So we just left, and we roll that way, that if we recognize, okay, this doesn't seem like it's something we want to continue doing for the foreseeable future, there's nothing here holding us back. So let's move on. And it's definitely, it could appear to some that it's a grass is greener, but it's a little more of understanding who you are. And I know when I put in my notice, I had a job with the federal government. And when I put in my notice, my boss said, I didn't think a cubicle isn't meant for you.
Yeah.
And good on you for knowing that at whatever age I was, 25. And that was it. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's it's liberating to be able to realize that, and then to act upon it. So diving into some of the hikes, the first hike for you, Beardoh, was the Appalachian Trail, the old standby, the classic AT, in 2011. So take me through, I guess even before going on the trip, your mindset and how you came to the AT.
So we had been running a business that I had started in 2003. And at some point in 2009, we just had this conversation about how we didn't have much adventure in life anymore. We were living up in the mountains in New Hampshire where we had been building a home and ourselves, but also running a business. And we felt tied down by the business and decided to sell the business and just started talking about things that would get adventure back into our life. And so that's kind of what prompted the idea of something as big or time consuming as the AT, is that we sold this business in the fall of 2010. We had a bit of a financial buffer to go walk for 5 months and be okay financially. And so that's basically what did it. Since we were in New Hampshire, we had some familiarity with the AT, but not a lot because we didn't grow up on the East Coast. Allison grew up in California. I grew up here in Wisconsin. And so it wasn't the myth of the AT wasn't part of our subconscious, but we our home in New Hampshire, which we still have, it's just 20 minutes from the AT.
Awesome. And you had never camped more than 2 nights. Is that what you said, Allison?
It's true. Yeah. And those 2 nights in a row were for prepping for the AT. It was like, before that, we had just gone out for like maybe 1 night. But even then, it's funny because Beardoh had given me a backpacking backpack for Christmas one year as his like, okay, I'm making this commitment to you that we're going to get out and we're going to have these overnight trips. And that backpack remained unused for, I don't know, like
years
until we ended up selling the business.
Yeah.
But it was just funny. Like we just hadn't been out for that long. And then, the way the AT really got on our radar was that we decided we were going to go for an overnight on 4th of July up in the White Mountains. And we were camping on one of the 4,000 footers above Waterville Valley, which is kind of like this resort skiing town. But in the summertime, people just come there for hiking and biking. But we figured, we'll be able to see the fireworks. We'll be kind of, I don't know what we were thinking. I think we figured they would be eye level, but of course they weren't. They were like minuscule.
They were like
they were so tiny.
You were in the mountains.
Yeah, but this trip, we had all of our heavy gear. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, our tent alone weighed 7 pounds, and it was so miserable of a hike, like walking up this mountain with this heavy pack. And when we finished, we were like, we're not going to keep backpacking if all of our stuff is so heavy. Like, how do these people do it? Like, I'm sure people that hike the AT must know what they're doing. So then we started looking at YouTube videos of people going through their gear who would hike the AT. And then we started thinking, maybe we should consider hiking the AT. And that's really kind of how it all evolved in our minds. But
that's pretty funny.
That is it. Now, a funny thing, Will, is that I actually have camped for more than a couple nights, but just not backpack.
Okay, sure.
And full circle back to canoeing it was canoe trips.
Of course, in Wisconsin.
And actually the Boundary Waters at the Minnesota-Canada border.
Sure.
And those trips were great. One was with scouts, and then one was with a couple friends. And those trips were awesome, but they were nothing like the Mississippi.
The hikers couldn't handle the water, huh?
The only thing they shared in common was water, canoes, and paddles. And that's kind
the
of...
The days were very different.
That's the end of it.
Oh, that's funny because it's funny to hear your perception because me as a paddler, I have the opposite perception of hiking, whereas I used to do a ton of backpacking, and I still do, and a lot of backpacking and love to backpack, but every time I'm in a canoe with my friends, I got a cooler, I have like a table, chairs. I'm like, man, why would you travel any other way?
Yeah. There are definitely some perks to canoeing, but no, hiking wins out for us.
Yeah, for us, we realized at some point in that trip, all 4 of us kind of felt like we'd rather be hiking.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
It was really something. And
Yeah.
because we all had that mentality, and you get into this mindset, where you compare the experiences, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Sure.
But once you start, it's like a disease,
But I think it's also bad that all four of us were through hikers, and we kind of tackled the Mississippi with that same mindset. It's like, all right, we have to wake up at 6 a.m. and we got to paddle until 6 p.m. It's like,
Right.
it was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we needed to have a more relaxed perspective about it, but we just have the through hiker mentality, and I think that was bad for us.
Yeah, river time is different than trail time,
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. But back to the AT, just out of my curiosity, what I'm curious about, like, characters. Obviously, this was in 2011, right?
Yeah.
So, memories fade, but I'm curious, like, if there was the first character or river or trail angel, I should say, that you ran into, or somebody where you were like, wow, this is, we are on the Appalachian Trail. I don't know if that's if that's a great question, if there's anything that pops into your mind, but I guess that first moment where you're like, okay, we're really in it.
There's definitely a lot of characters that you meet. I think when we hiked the Appalachian Trail, we hiked it southbound. So there's quite a lot fewer people hiking it southbound than there are northbound. And I think the bulk of the characters, quote unquote characters, are probably hiking northbound. So I think most of the people see them. We definitely saw some characters, but like one trail angel experience that really sticks out for us on the AT. And since we were going southbound, we didn't have like the traditional, Boy Scouts setting up the big barbecues and,
Sure.
Trail magic,
stuff
Right.
like that.
Trail magic.
But we were in Virginia one day, and it was just the two of us hiking together, and we were coming close to a town or a road that we're going to have to hitch into town to do our resupply. And these two ladies walk up to us, coming in the opposite direction, just out for a day hike. And we start talking to them for a little bit, and they're asking us about our through hike. And then we just ask them, okay, when we get to the road, which direction do we need to like be on the road to hitch? Because we did hitch in the wrong direction at one time
No.
on the AT. But so they were like, oh, well, our car is just parked down at the road. You're welcome to take our car. So they just literally gave us the keys to their car. And they're like, oh, just, put the keys under the bumper when you're done.
Yeah.
And we could not believe it. It was like this nice Volvo car. And we like get in it, and literally one of their credit cards is like in the way. It's like, oh my gosh, these people are so trusting of us.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just brightened our day so much to like have that kind of generosity and kindness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
The trails, like, there's a lot of people you meet on these trails. At this point, I've done a little over 12,000 miles on long distance trips, and SweetPea is really close to that. And there are some kooky folks that you meet and you hear about on the trail, and then you finally meet them, and they're a little less kookier than everybody has made them out to be.
Sure.
And then occasionally you meet some people who are kind of legendary on the trail. For instance, the Pacific Crest Trail has a legendary guy named Billy Goat, who has been doing like 2,000 miles on the trail for 20 years, every year. And at this point, he's in his 70s. I'm not sure if he hikes anymore, but I meet him, and he's a normal dude who just likes to hike a lot. They're down to earth. But I'd probably say that some of the most interesting folks are normal people that are hiking the trail that are doing one of two things. They're serial hikers similar to us, and they have to live a out of the box lifestyle to continue doing this. And then secondly are people who when they stepped on the trail, they cut the cord from their previous life, as in quit a professional career, sold their car, house, everything, and started hiking. And they were really expecting this life-changing hike, and they may or may not have gotten the epiphany that they were hoping for, but they at least had a lot of time to think about what they wanted to do next and chat about that with other people on the trail. And those are kind of the funnest people to spend time with, I think, because it's such a transitional point in their life.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. That's one of the things that I love most. That I love doing this podcast and talking with folks who, who seek adventure and who, seek it out. And also the folks you meet on those adventures. Just the most interesting of characters. And it's awesome to be able to sit down. I love just hearing people's stories. And I feel like when you're out, off the beaten path or on the beaten path even, but especially when you're out on these adventures, these long distance hikes, these long distance paddles, time spent away where you're solo or with one other person or a few other people, the people you meet are just so willing to open up and share their story, and you meet a lot of interesting folk, don't you?
Yeah, some people, you might only hike with them for an hour or two, but you learn so much about them just in that short amount of time, just because the experience is just, I think I don't know if it's expected, but it's totally okay. And everybody just talks about things that you might not normally talk about to somebody that you've just met. But it's funny how like everybody has an interesting backstory if you just, start talking to them a bit. There was one guy that we met on the AT, and we were only around him for a few days, but he led these fire walking experiences, I guess you would call them.
Where you walk on the coals?
Sure.
Yeah. And he was so interesting to talk to. And so, I mean, it's just completely random, and, who would have known that we would meet somebody like that on the trail?
Yeah.
But you just meet these people with really interesting histories.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Beardoh, circling back to your first point on this subject, curious, how you guys have made this life that you've planned for and strive for, have made it happen, and B, some of the other stories of people in your circle or folks who from the trail who have been able to live a life outside the box in order to live a life that they find fulfilling.
Sure. So for us, I think that after the AT, maybe really running into even through a few more trails into 2014, I think by that time we had learned to live pretty inexpensively. And we actually still own our home in New Hampshire, but we've had it rented out since 2014. And we started going to Mexico during the winter because we realized, we wanted to be in a climate where we could hike and be outside a lot in the winter. And there are great things about New Hampshire winters, but some of them were tough on us. And we realized it was cheaper for us to go rent an apartment in Mexico than it was for us to live in the home that we owned. So we rented out our home in New Hampshire, and that took care of the taxes and insurance and other costs of that home. And like once we eliminated that, and we didn't really have a lot for bills. And so I think we put together a budget per year of what we needed to live on. And we hadn't really done that before, but we did after selling the business because we didn't want to go back to work right away. And by the experience of going to Mexico kind of helped us realize how inexpensively we could live and have a really good life. And so we just kept doing that. And we've been down to either Mexico or Guatemala every year since 2013 for the winter. And that has been excellent. And so our time of the year is split usually between this big chunk in Mexico and then time in the US on hiking trips, and then visiting family and friends on either side of the hiking trips, depending on where the hikes are, if they're in Canada or the West Coast. And that's been really good. And we're able to pull it off simply because it doesn't cost a lot for this lifestyle.
Sure.
We can get by on easily under $1,000 a month around the year, and especially in Mexico. So that's mostly how we put it together there. That's the key part of our strategy, is to be pretty frugal.
Sure.
And we don't spend money too frivolously. But we also have a couple small businesses that they're passive in the sense that they don't require us to work on them a year round. We can put in a chunk of time and work hard for a while, and
There's
then
the thunder, huh?
Have that free time. That was it.
It's coming.
So we have essentially 3 businesses right now that operate in that capacity.
Okay, and what are those businesses?
They're all related to bass guitars. I built basses commercially for a little over a decade, but during that time I'd started up a business selling parts for guitars, and specifically basses again, and they're like the electronic components and hardware.
Sure. And
they tend to be stuff that are desirable when you're trying to upgrade a cheap instrument.
Okay.
And then they're commonly found things on high-end boutique instruments. And so there's a little bit of a mix of clientele. But at this point, we have a business where we own inventory and we sell these parts to players and hobby builders. And so we have a website for that. It's called fatbasstone.com.
Nice.
And so
like the website name.
Yeah. And we have a partner in Maine that we run that with. That's one business. Another business is consulting for one of the suppliers for that business, where we help work on their website. And then another business is doing wiring for electronic harnesses that go in bass guitars. And so we have somebody that does that wiring that we've contracted with.
Awesome.
And that's kind of how it goes down. And so we have these periods of time that are fairly work intensive at this point in life. And this winter was a huge one. It was very work intensive because we were building Fat Bass Tone. We just launched it in December.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, just kind of getting back into the groove of e-commerce and understanding the changes that have taken place since we sold the business in 2010.
Sure. Awesome. Well, that sounds like a great plan. And I think with at least most of it, and with anybody who's successful in general, but certainly with most adventure folks who I've spoken with and know, living frugally and living well below your means is always a key to success, right?
Yeah. We live frugally, but we feel like we have pretty good lives. You know, it's not like we've had to sacrifice. We don't feel like.
Yeah, we easily put a premium on experience.
Sure.
And freedom. and independence.
Yeah.
So that has a lot of value to us.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and to me as well, and I think to a lot of the folks who live a similar lifestyle. Curious, going back to the trails. So the AT is the first big trail on the list, and then you go right back at it. You're obviously hungry for more and head to the Pacific Crest Trail, correct?
Yeah, I did the Pacific Crest Trail in 2012.
And you've done it twice now, is that right? You did it in 2012, and then both of you did it together as well?
Yeah. In 2016.
Yeah.
Yep.
So give me a rundown of the Pacific Crest Trail, just generally. I kind of know I have the idea of it runs along the West Coast, but I couldn't tell you much more than that.
Sure. It's 2,650 miles. It goes from the Mexico-California border to the Washington-Canada border. You have a big chunk of desert for the first 700 miles, and then right from there you go up into the high Sierras. And you go through that wonderful area, and then the areas north of it, like Tahoe and Truckee, Shasta. And then up into Oregon. Once you're into Northern California, you're kind of out of the Sierra range and you're up into the Cascade range. That range actually starts in California. And so you're in that, it's a range, but it's volcanic range. So Shasta, Mount Lassen, Adams, as you get further up north into Washington. But it's a hugely diverse trail. And I love it. It's an incredible trail. And that's why I was down to do it a second time. I would be pretty surprised if I left Earth without doing a third time.
Oh, that's awesome. How long were both runs of the PCT? How long did it take you?
The first time was 4 months and a week, roughly. And the second time was just short of 5 months.
Yeah, I think it was like maybe 4 months and 3 weeks or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, we finished I think you finished on like September 9th in 2012.
Yeah.
And then we finished on September 25th, I think it was, in 2016. And you definitely got to see all the fall colors in Washington, which I didn't even really expect. I didn't know that there would be the fall colors because I just thought it was all pine trees and you're not going to see any color change. But I mean, I had no idea about the larches and turning yellow and the blueberry bushes turning to deep red. It was just spectacular, and I had no idea. So it was such a nice surprise.
Yeah, the PCT is unique amongst all of the trails that we've hiked so far in that it is built so incredibly well. I read a hiker refer to the trail as a Cadillac of trails.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And this was before we had hiked even the AT. I just had been reading his blog and he had mentioned this. And it truly is. It's well graded. There's switchbacks where there needs to be switchbacks. And there's water. The trail is routed pretty well for water.
It's built so that horses can go up it. So it can never be too steep that a horse wouldn't be able to get up or down it. So that's a huge difference from like the Appalachian Trail, which has some parts that are just really steep. And, in Maine, I don't think there's any switchbacks, or at least it feels like there never is. You're just going straight up or straight down. So the PCT is so different from the Appalachian Trail, just in that one perspective.
Yeah, it is. It's starting to gain. Well, you know how the AT has a bit of a mythological stature.
Yep.
So it's a really old trail. People have been through hiking it en masse for a couple decades at least. And when we did the AT, I think there was probably, I don't know, maybe around 3,500 people that attempted a through hike that year. And the PCT, I think there was around 700 people in 2012. And in 2016, I don't know, 4,000.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's dramatically grown from various publicity that it's had over the years. And so the PCT, I think, is starting to get a little mythical amongst people. And so it's a great hike, but it starts in the desert, and that's challenging for folks. So a lot of folks who come to the big trails aren't terribly different than us in that they haven't had much backpacking experience.
Right.
And that is cool in some ways, and in other ways it can be pretty rough on you. And we fortunately had a pile of experience hiking in the mountains in New Hampshire, because it was literally right out the back door. We were real close to the national forest and hiked a ton. We were very, I guess, adept day hikers. But there's some folks who start the trails that aren't. And on the PCT, it has a possibility to be a little more dangerous. And every year there's people who get helicoptered out because of dehydration and some other challenges.
Sure. What do you have a specific day that comes to mind, either of you, for in terms of getting your butt kicked on the PCT, like a day when you're just like down in the dumps, like the wind's howling sideways, and you're just like, where am I? What am I doing here?
Yeah, I mean, for us, Washington was tough because about half of the days it rained, which is, I think, generally pretty unusual on the PCT. You often have really nice weather all summer. But there was one day in Washington where we were going through glacier wilderness, and it just rained all day, and it was cold. So it was like, I don't know, high 30, lows 40s, and just pouring all day. And it was beyond miserable. And we finally get to camp. I don't know, after we probably went, 23 miles, something like that. Finally get to camp. Beardoh and I both hammock, so we're putting up our hammock tarps and getting our hammocks going. And we both realize that we have leaks in our hammock tarps. And it's just like, oh my God, I want this day to be over so bad. Like, I was in tears. I was just like, I don't even want to be here right now. This is so terrible. But we managed to get our leaks dealt with and got through the rest of the evening, but it was tough.
It was tough. We have this kind of joke between us, and it actually started before the AT. We went out on what thru hikers call a shakedown trip. So you go out for 3-4 days or a couple days just to make sure you set up your gear, you're pulling stuff in and out of your pack so you know how you want to pack, if you got the right stuff with you. And we just looked at some paper maps for the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire and said, okay, we know where this trail goes and we've never been further out on it. And so we said, okay, we'll go on that. We'll take this out and we'll do this loop, like a 35-mile loop over 2 days. And on the second day, this was probably May, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably.
And there was still snow on the ground, and the trail that we didn't really know about was knee-high snow, and the trail wasn't there. It wasn't that there was snow covering the trail only. There was just snow across the whole landscape, and there was no visible trail at all. And we're post-holing, but our ankles are in water. There's like 5 inches of water flowing below this because this is a good sign actually, because we're probably on the trail and the water is just running down the trail, but we're in this knee deep or higher snow, and our feet are in super cold water. And it it'll never be this bad on the AT, right? And I don't know that it was on the AT, but that level of it can't get worse than this,
right,
is kind of,
it's inched up over the years.
it's really and I mean, in 2014, we had a day on the Muir Trail where it started snowing. I want to say it was mid-August.
Mm-hmm.
And we were coming over Glen Pass. And it's snowing up there. And, man, this is so out of season. The snow turns the rain. We're hiking with a couple friends. And this additional friend that we didn't know of theirs that they had invited along, he started to show signs of hyperthermia.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, wasn't really thinking straight and had a hard time understanding why he should put on a rain jacket and not wear his down layer on the outside. And that was definitely it can't get worse than this kind of a day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're like 3 or 4 levels beyond that at this point. In the Mississippi, I know there was at least 1 or 2 days where we said, it can't get worse than this. When, I don't know if you had it where your hands hurt and they kind of like didn't want to extend beyond this.
Had the permanent claw.
That's funny. You know what? I don't think I've ever had the permanent claw, but were you guys using kayak paddles? Or canoe paddles?
No.
Canoe paddles. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But we were total newbies. I mean, especially me. I had spent basically no time at all in a canoe before we bought this canoe for the trip.
That's half the fun.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if how you dealt with the St. Louis Industrial Corridor.
Oh, that was one of my it can't get worse than this moments.
Yeah, ours too. Well, it was for cue ball and safety. Our friends, they almost went under.
Yeah, I was the same way. And to give people a picture, I was just telling this story. I think it was yesterday. Actually, I was out fishing with a buddy and talking about this. How. Yeah, it's kind of strange because for the whole river, obviously it's just a river. You might have a levee or just some trees, sand, beaches, whatever you want. But when you get into St. Louis, the port of St. Louis, either side is just seawall, where these huge giant barges moor, anchor up to the side of the seawall. So as I was going through, and maybe you had the same experience, it's like the chop from the barges, which are constantly zooming back and forth. It's the port of St. Louis. There's a lot of commerce and barge traffic that goes through there, and the wakes from the barges crash off of the seawall and then get reverbed back into the main channel. And I remember I was paddling. I was probably about 3/4 of the way through the strait there, through the port of St. Louis, and got caught with a reverbed wave, like we were talking, coming off the seawall, while another wave was coming the opposite way, and my boat got turned sideways. And
oh no!
And it was one of those moments where I thought I was going in. I was able to save it just by instinct. I don't know how, but I remember thinking in my mind, like, oh shit, I'm about to swim in the port of St. Louis where there's barges constantly cruising by. I'll get washed right into it. And that was one of those moments for me. That was tricky stuff, huh?
Yeah, that was definitely a nervous moment there.
Yeah, we had a tough situation this past fall on the Oregon Desert Trail, and the winter started, I don't know if you recall last year, fall of 2019, but Montana had like 3 feet of snow. I think it was
at the end of September.
At the end of, yeah.
Sure, yep.
And Oregon, Eastern Oregon, had been hit with really cold weather as well. And we had nights where my watch stopped recording the temperature, which it cuts out at 14 degrees. And we didn't expect that, but we could all handle that. But we were basically, the next section of trail, we were climbing up into the mountains, I think it was around 8,000 feet. It was one of the highest sustained sections. And we're getting up there, and it is just that grayness that you see when it's snowing. So you had no features to navigate with.
Sure.
And our phones started freezing. So the paper maps were useless. And, there are situations where technology has an advantage. And when you're in a whiteout condition, technology does have an advantage, because if you can read your screen and you have a GPS signal, you can hopefully make it where you need to go. But as phones started to freeze and the batteries, the battery just goes to zero and it shuts off, that was bad.
And we weren't on the Oregon Desert Trail. Isn't a true trail. It's more of a route. And so, there's some cross country, there's some, dirt roads. And so it wasn't like you could just keep following this path as long as you saw the path. It was like you needed to be able to understand where you were and navigate yourself through this area. And you just couldn't see anything. And the phones weren't working. And it was so cold.
Yeah, that was it can't get worse than this kind of moment, and that was just last year. So we can say that going into the CVT. Well, it's probably not going to get worse than that. Lie to ourselves a little bit longer.
So outside of the big ones, which for a noob like me, a non-hiker, well, I am a hiker, but not a long distance hiker. The AT, the PCT, what do they refer to as the Triple Crown?
Yeah. So the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. Those three together are the Triple Crown.
And so that is what you two will be planning for next, huh? Is the Continental Divide Trail?
Yeah. So if we're able to finish that this year, then we would have the Triple Crown trail.
So what's
completion.
What's the give me the overlay of the Continental Divide Trail, and then kind of your plans with it?
So the CDT starts at the New Mexico border, south of Lordsburg, New Mexico, and goes through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, up to the Canada border, just north of Glacier. It's kind of like, if you're familiar with East Glacier, which is a big tourist area up there. So it's north of that, 50, 60 miles. So pre-virus, our plan was to start at the southern U.S. border, and walk north. But we postponed our plans, and at this point now we're planning to start mid-June in West Yellowstone, and we'll hike north to the Canada border, and then we'll do what's called in through hiking circles as a flip-flop, and we'll go down to West Yellowstone, probably rent a car from Glacier and get down to West Yellowstone, and then hike south. And the reason for doing that is that we don't want to be in the desert in June and July of New Mexico.
That sounds smart.
And this is a little tricky. It's a very tricky year for hikers, because if they had planned on a northbound hike, they have to adjust it if they did not get on when they planned to. And I think there's a lot of hikers in our situation where we just felt let's wait a little bit and see how states react to the virus, because we had to make this decision in late March of whether to go forward with the hike or postpone. And so so we'll head out in just under 3 weeks.
Awesome. That's super exciting. What is the Continental Divide Trail known for amongst thru hikers?
I think it's evolved as apps and stuff like that have come around to help with some navigation, but I think historically it's been known as a much less finished trail than like the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail. I think it tends to have a reputation of being a more challenging trail than the other two.
Yeah, there's the guidebook that has been probably the most prominent guidebook that a lady puts out. Her name is Yogi. And that guidebook, like when you open the front cover, it just says "Embrace the Brutality" across. Sure. And I think among most thru hikers, this hike is seen as fairly difficult.
You also have like snow factors much more prevalent than I think some of the other trails. Like the Pacific Crest Trail, you have the Sierras to deal with, but you don't generally have like the Washington snow to deal with unless you're super like late in the game. But with the CDT, you have the snow in the San Juans in southern Colorado, but then you also have the snow in Glacier in Montana. And so you're trying to like thread this very small needle of, you know, your window of time to make it through there and not have to deal with that much snow. And I think a lot of times for people just going straight northbound, they just accept the fact that they're going to be in a lot of snow in the San Juans, which I personally didn't want to deal with because that's very much out of my comfort zone.
Sure.
And so we figured that doing a flip-flop would be kind of getting us into the time. So, you know, hopefully we'll be going through Glacier in, you know, middle to end of July, which hopefully the snow is mostly gone by then. And then in the San Juans, we should be making it through there by the end of September before the new snow comes. So we're hoping that we've made it through.
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
You two are veterans of the game, so you know how it goes. But tell you what, I've spent plenty of times in Yellowstone where I've been snowed on in July. So
yeah,
I know.
Saddle up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, we won't be surprised when we get snowed on in July.
No,
it's super possible.
Absolutely. But, well, hey, I've really appreciated having you guys on. We're going to kind of slowly wrap it up here, but we're definitely going to have to get you back on after your CDT attempt here, and I'd love to find out more about that trail.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so a couple more questions for you. One, I saw, what's your website and where can we find you online?
Our website is longdistancehiker.com. And yeah, we have daily journals from every hike, as well as the Mississippi trip, as well as some photo galleries on there and a little bit of hiker tips and gear lists for those interested in that.
Awesome. And one of the posts that I found of special interest that I saw was the importance of journaling, or maybe it wasn't the importance, but the importance to you of journaling. Curious on your thoughts on journaling, your journaling process for all of these trips that you've done over the years, over 12,000 miles. That's a lot of miles and a lot of stories and a lot of journals, I'd have to imagine.
Yeah, it's evolved over the years. When we started, I think actually when we were on the AT, Brian wrote all the journals and just asked me, like, as we were laying in our hammocks, so what should I write about today? And, you know, he'd write it up. And then starting on the Arizona Trail, we would swap every other day. We would each write one. And now it's gotten to the point where I write all the journals and Beardoh processes all the photos. And that's kind of how we've differentiated our tasks.
That's a good way to do it.
But it's funny. Yeah, before we started the Mississippi River, I think Beardoh was kind of like, you know, I'm kind of like burned out on the daily journal thing. And so we're like, well, maybe we'll just do like a once a week journal entry or something for the Mississippi River trip. And So I just started writing, and then I was like, oh, I feel like I have a lot to say each day. So I can actually just do a daily journal. And then I just said, I'll just write the journal each day because I like doing it. I like having that something to read back through after we've done a hike. Or I know that our parents appreciate it. Not that we have a lot of people reading it or anything, but we know that our parents like it. And, we have some friends that like to read it. So.
Yeah, for me,
we've benefited a lot from other hikers' journals
Sure.
In a very pragmatic and logistical sense. As we've, the CDT is definitely a marked trail with an association, but we've started to do a lot less traveled routes. And if you can find a journal for some of these, it's a really big deal to help understand water and to help understand, this stretch we can't do 24 miles. We probably need to plan for half that. And that's really helpful to know. So kind of passing on the information, that probably sounds a little more logistical than it needs to, but that's a big help.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I was just talking with a couple of high school friends today, and we were talking about things that have happened 20 years ago. Allie and I are in our mid 40s, but we're like remembering things in different ways.
Yeah.
And you do realize you misremember things and forget a lot of things. And some of those things are really neat. And so it's good to go back through our own journals and read them. And we do have friends that aren't public that carry a small little, 3x5 inch notebook to write in. But it's the same thing. They have that too. But I do appreciate the fact that with an online journal, we can put our own photos in to go back and reflect on and just enjoy.
Yeah, it's cool. For me personally, I've done trips where I've done it, and I've done trips where I haven't done it. And in the moment, I never want to do it. I never want to sit down and journal. I'm always like, I'll push it off. I won't do it tonight. I'll make up tomorrow, or however it goes. So typically for me, I'll start journaling for like the first week of a trip, and then I'll stop for like 4 or 5 days, and then I'll go 7 days, and then I'll stop for a few days. But I don't read them often when I look back on the trips, but after having completed it, maybe once every other year or a couple times a year, I'll pop one out and just open it up to a random page. And it's kind of like reliving that moment, like feeling the paper on the page and knowing that was written at this exact moment. And just the feelings that it takes you back to is kind of cool for me. Just knowing reading my own writing in those moments, I can feel how open and happy and content I was at that time, which is cool,
Nice.
Yep. There's some days, I've had a couple days on the trail where it's like I'm so tired by the time I'm laying down in my hammock that all I can do is just write a couple bullet points, and I'll go back the next day and fill it out. That doesn't happen too long, and it's usually an indication of all right, that was a total beatdown of a day.
Right, and it usually involves food, right? Oatmeal for breakfast.
Oh, no.
Okay, last one for you. Any books or videos or resources that you guys have been reading or consuming that have inspired you that you'd like to share, or if somebody was looking for something to consume that you would recommend to them?
Interesting. Wow.
Well, when we were first starting to think about switching from a tent to a hammock, we watched a lot of videos from a guy whose trail name is Shug.
Shug.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a professor I think at University of Minnesota.
And I think he used to be a circus clown, and he is hilarious. But
Yeah.
he's really thorough, and he's really helpful for people who are interested in learning about hammocking.
That
Yeah,
sounds like a great combination of a YouTube sensation right there. A professor,
It is.
clown, backpacking
He's
extraordinaire.
great. He's hilarious.
Wonderful and knowledgeable.
Ray Jardine's
Ray
books.
Jardine's book. So this will date us a little bit, but these books were written like, I think Ray Jardine started writing in the 90s. And he wrote books on mostly ultralight backpacking. And I'm blanking.
And some do-it-yourself gear as well.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the latest one that he wrote, which was probably early 2000s. But if you do a search for Ray Jardine, you'll find out I think, an interesting approach to any kind of backpacking, whether it's through hiking, for 5 months, 5 weeks, or just going out for a couple nights. And he kind of turns a lot of the outdoor industry as an industry on end, and is really a lot about building your own gear, which impacted us greatly.
Huh, interesting. Ray Jardine?
Ray Jardine. He even has patents in rock climb equipment, something called the Friend.
Okay.
But at any rate, I think that was probably the most influential thing on us. We're not big consumers of some of the content providers that have come out on YouTube. So it's not something that we pay attention to. And to be honest, I think if a person goes on to Amazon or a book, just a book on a trail that is maybe a little less about the logistics of it and a little bit more about the diary of it, the experience of it, I think that's a lot better. Folks really get hung up on gear in this scene, and it's a real loss, because even though we're ultralighters and we weigh our stuff and we try to bring the weight down when possible, it's a real waste of time to do that until you know what really works for you. And it's walking, It's walking and sleeping in the woods at night. And there are a few more things to it than that, but that's the fundamental of it. And we all can do that.
One more book that we had read before we started the Appalachian Trail is called AWOL on the AT. And it's very much like a daily journal, like you would see online now, but the guy had done it in a book form. And it was great. It was like, you don't need any drama. You don't need, whatever. It's just like, yep, this is what his day looked like. This is who he saw. This is what he saw. And I think that was much more of a realistic and a helpful thing to read.
Sure.
Before starting the trail, gives you more of like a realistic expectation.
Yeah. There's a little bit of drama coordination in some of the hiking videos you see.
Sure.
Not everybody, but that's going on. And for a lot of us that do this kind of in a serial way, doing it every summer and work our lives around it, it gets a little weird to see that. They're hunting for clicks and views, and it's a little weird for us to see that. But
yeah, I understand. It's an interesting juxtaposition, if I can say that word. Trying to create content around the idea of being away from it all,
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And I understand that people want to find the quote best backpack, but the answer is that there isn't one. Some of our best friends use different stuff, and that's great. Whatever, they try something that works, they keep using it. If it doesn't work, they sell it and move on. And then
yeah.
And
I always find especially with people who don't have a lot of experience. I think the more experience you get, the more you realize the gear doesn't make or break you typically. As long as you have like a baseline of rain gear, someplace warm to sleep, and a tent that doesn't leak too bad, you don't really need much. It's like, get out there, go light, go slow, go now,
Yeah, exactly. The most important thing is to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brian and Allison, Beardoh and SweetPea, really appreciate you guys stopping by and breaking it all down of the adventures of Beardoh and SweetPea, the long distance hikers. So thanks again, and we're looking forward to talking to you again after the CDT.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having us, Will.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Will. Thanks.
All right, there you have it. Episode number 11 of the Buffalo Roamer podcast, officially in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. We got a lot more great stuff coming your way. I'm really excited for next week's episode. I'll be recording that soon, so check in on that one. Also, if you want to find out more, you can find us online at buffaloroamer.com, Facebook and Instagram, Buffalo Roamer. Instagram is Buffalo_Roamer. And just keep an eye out on what's happening here with us, because we got a lot more great stuff coming your way. Hope you enjoy wherever you may be in the world right now, and hope you go find yourself some fresh air and go somewhere where the sound of nature is louder than the sound of humans. All right, take it easy. Until next time on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast.